Today is Friday, February 7th, and I'm here with Liz Ringstad, and we're going to talk about the founding of the League of Women Voters in Ripon.
Yes.
And I wanted to say that, Liz, you are a very special person to me because when I was a young housebound mother with little kids, you took me under your wing and we did radio interviews together. And I worked on voter service with you at the time.
Yes, I guess you did.
Yes, and I'm very grateful. It was a wonderful way to get out of the house and be involved. My husband had said, you're a college graduate. You probably want to do more than scrub floors and take care of little kids. So.
Well, I think that our husbands were alike in that they all knew we were educated about equally with them. There were a number of women whose husbands were pharmacists, and not all in the same pharmacy either. But they also had college educations, and they were responsible for their homes. We all were. Some of us had family that would help, and some of us didn't. Some of us had enough money to hire some help, and some of us didn't. But we all were alike in that we were doing all this unpaid work in the home, which was expected of women of our class, because we were not high middle class. We were like lower middle class people, if you're very realistic about it. You never like to think you're lower anything, but the truth of the matter is we were lower middle class people. We were not the ones that had several $1 million. No, we had what we earned in the family, and that was it. And some of us inherited a little money, but it wasn't enough to be real, wow, look at our family. I didn't know any women like that. I knew all these people. Some of them, their husbands were teaching at the college. Some of them had other jobs at the college, like a finance officer or something like that. And so there were lots of interesting jobs involved with the husbands. And the wives were at home raising the children and doing the housework. And as I said, I think that when you were born, Cindy, I think your father should have looked at you and said, I think she'd be a good lawyer, because you would have been. But they were not used to thinking of women in those jobs in those days.
He did encourage my younger sisters to consider law.
Yes.
Do you remember, Liz, we talked the other day about when we looked at this early League of Women Voters of Ripon. It wasn't Ripon area at that time, it was Ripon.
Ripon, period.
The League of Women Voters of Ripon, we looked at the names of the women who belonged at that time. There were over 40, but they were all listed with Mrs. and the name of their husband and the last name and their real first name in parentheses at the end. So we talked about today you wouldn't want to be listed that way.
No, you'd just be listed. I would just be listed as Elizabeth Ringstad or Liz Ringstad. I wouldn't be listed as Mrs. Leonard Ringstad.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I had talked about the first time your mother went to vote and the first time you went to see to.
Okay, when I was able to vote you for the first time, you had to be 21 years old. And I was teaching in a little town, and I was there 5 days a week teaching their kids. And when it came election day, I went to the polls, and they said, "No, we can't let you vote here." Well, I said, "Why not? I work here. It's where I earn my living." They said, "Yes, but you go home every weekend to your parents' home, and that's where you're really living." I said, "No, that isn't. That's where I kind of go for a vacation on the weekend. But I earn my living right here, teaching your kids." And I don't earn a cent back in my hometown. I only earn it all here. I should be able to vote here. And they refused to let me vote. And I was all excited because it was a national election. And I knew exactly who I wanted to vote for president. And I wasn't going to be allowed to vote. And so it was very disappointing. And I knew there was such a thing as a League of Women Voters that registered people to vote, so that if you went to vote, you were registered in advance. And that happened here in Ripon, too. And we have good voter registration here, and I rely on it for elections year after year. Betty Ott, the lady across the street, comes and helps me with my ballot, since I no longer can see to read the ballot.
Liz, do you remember what year this was?
What?
Do you remember which year it was you wanted to vote for the first time?
No, I can't remember. My daughter, I think, could figure that out, because she knew what happened. The Chicago Tribune carried the wrong results of the election. And she said, "I know you voted for the guy that did not win," because I was voting Republican all the way in those days. It wasn't the kind of Republican we have now. It was the kind of Republican that were founded, where we founded the Republican Party right in this town. And my mother was a Republican all her life, and she said there was only one Democrat she could ever have voted for, and that was Eleanor Roosevelt.
Wow.
Because Eleanor Roosevelt was for the women and the blacks. And we just, we decided, yeah, that's the kind of Republican Party I grew up in. And now, of course, it's not that way anymore. If you want it for the women and the blacks, you better be a Democrat. And so that things really change over, well, I've lived close to 100 years. Why wouldn't things change? When you stop and think, my father was born in 1890, and I was born in 1927. So you can see, when you live over that long a period of history, things really do change.
They certainly do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm remembering we've also talked about when the women like Nedra Martz and you, Bev Kalenbrink, other women in Ripon sought to investigate and move forward carefully with studying how to be illegal women voters, getting approval from the state.
Yes, and we wanted to make it clear that we were interested in politics, but not interested in supporting any one political party. We were interested in looking at issues, things that concerned us, whether it was something about the local schools or something about the city council or something about the county board, or whether it was something about the whole state, such as we recently voted to our choice for Supreme Court. And I did that while I was in the nursing home. So that was taken care of over there. And when the ballot arrived here, my friend Paul knew I'd already voted, so he destroyed it because he knew I'd already voted. And so I voted while I was in the nursing home. But yeah, Betty Ott is usually the one that helps me with my ballot.
Excellent.
And she does that for other people as well, that she's been doing that as a service to the community for years. And so anyway, the next time an election comes up, I expect to be here, not in any nursing home.
Excellent.
And it will be Betty Ott that helps me with my ballot.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
You and I talked also about, from what I can see in our old annual meeting booklets, it must have been 1961 when the women came together and started to explore founding
I think
the
so it was.
And
But we probably didn't finish printing a review of the city. There was something like that we had to.
Requirements?
What?
Wasn't that a requirement the state league wanted us to
Yes,
study?
you had to prevent a review of the city that you lived in. And so we did a big study of the city here. And do you have a cover of one of our annual meeting books?
I have a cover of one that dates back to 1966-67.
It doesn't matter. On the front of it is an oak tree that has since been cut down. But it was that old oak on that square, remember? And
Signal oak.
what?
Signal oak.
Yes. And so that was the sort of the sign for our league. And yes, we were all sorry when it came down, but it's still on the front cover of all our annual meeting books.
Yes, it is. I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about some of the early members. And Nedra Martz, who was also one of the founding members, has been involved in helping us gather.
Yes, Nedra Martz has helped a lot. She now lives over near, what am I trying to say? Near Kansas City. She lives in one of the suburbs there. And I don't know if it's a suburb of Kansas City, Kansas, or Kansas City, Missouri. But Kansas City, Kansas is very much the university town, and Kansas City, Missouri is more sophisticated with theaters and opera houses and things like that. And so Yes, I visited there, so that's why I feel I can speak to that. But yeah, she lives in one of those suburbs. She left here to go and stay with her brother, who was, I can't remember if he was younger or older than she, but she went to stay with him, and I don't know if he's still living or not, but she will continue to live over there. She's developed, many friendships over all the years she's been there. And she goes to a Methodist church that reminds her very much of the Congregational church that she attended here in Ripon with me.
Yes. You and I also talked because you remember that both Illinois and Wisconsin women wanted to be the first states to...
What did you say?
You and I talked about both Illinois and Wisconsin wanted to be the first states to ratify the suffrage movement, allowing women the right to vote.
Yes.
And Illinois voted the same day as Wisconsin.
Yes, but Wisconsin was lucky. One of our U.S. senators who had supported the women in trying to get the right to vote, changing the Constitution, he was in Washington. So we just telegraphed him and said the legislature just passed the constitutional amendment. And so he immediately reported that to the Senate that it had been passed by the Wisconsin Assembly. Now, Illinois did theirs the same day, but they had to put someone on a fast train to Washington, D.C. from Chicago. And when they got there, they reported it, but it was after Wisconsin. So it was these Midwest states out here that passed the constitutional amendment. Illinois and Wisconsin the same day, and soon after Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa, all of those states out here in the Midwest were the first to give women the right to vote. But I think it was the way that women worked together on the farms and everything in the Midwest. They were very important on the farm. I can remember my grandmother and my great-grandmother, how important they were, just as important as their husbands, to running that business. And so so I can see that's the way all these rural towns were. And so that's why women got the right to vote. And both parents were very concerned about the schools always. And so some of them were coming from backgrounds where they didn't know much English, and so they needed to learn English. And others could understand and read English, so it was easier for them. But if you got somebody, I'll take my husband. His father was Norwegian Lutheran. Leonard was baptized Norwegian. Then he was confirmed Catholic, and that Catholic was Polish Catholic. His mother was Polish. Imagine. My kids used to die when they thought about their background. Norwegian and Polish on that side. And in my side, I was English, which is really the Cornish part of England, way down on the South Shore, Cornwall. That's where my family was from. And then I was Irish, the Catholic Irish from the county of Cork, and the Scotch Irish, which are the Protestant Irish. And so, and then I also was a little bit of Pennsylvania Dutch, and that was because my Scotch Irish great-grandfather had married a Mennonite. And you know, they're like the Amish, a peace group, but Mennonites will marry outside. And so she married this Scotch-Irish man, and she was really blonde. And my grandfather inherited the blonde hair. And I had my sister and my 3 cousins and I was the only one that inherited the platinum blonde hair.
It's a little bit like rolling dice, I think.
What?
It's a little bit like rolling dice to see what you inherit.
Yes, right. And that was, I never thought that I was particularly good looking or anything, but boy, I was proud of that blonde hair because there weren't many people that had that. Like Leonard was blonde, but he was blonde from the Polish side. His sisters were all blonde, and he had cousins. There was a cousin of Leonard's that when I'd see him across, the Polish church up at Hatley was where the family would gather for everything. And when I would see him at one of those, that cousin across the lawn someplace, I honestly goodness thought it was my husband. From the back, he walked like him. He had the same color hair, the same shape head, the whole thing. When he turned around, of course, it wasn't Leonard. It was his cousin. But it's amazing the genetic characteristics that we carry. And so my kids used to think they had the weirdest background you could possibly have. With
Yes.
Norwegian and Polish, and then English and Irish and Pennsylvania Dutch. And they would just shake their heads and said they were the weirdest minority in the whole country.
You know what I was just thinking about, Liz?
What?
Carrie Chapman Catt was, I wonder if we want to talk about Carrie Chapman Catt, because she was the founder of the League of Women Voters. And she was born here in Ripon?
Yes, yes. Well, yes, she was. She was born here in Ripon, Wisconsin. And she was like so many others, very well educated, a teacher. She assisted. You're talking with a league that was founded back in 1920-21. Yeah, we had a league here earlier, and then by the 1930s, it had fallen apart. And then we were reorganizing a league in the early 30s.
You talked to me also about Eleanor Roosevelt's.
Okay, I'll tell you. Yes, really the first League of Women Voters was founded in New York City. And it was founded by very socially prominent, very wealthy women. Eleanor Roosevelt was a friend of these people, and they founded a League of Women Voters in New York City. And they were prominent enough so the New York Times would pick their name up and pay attention to this group because they were both wealthy and well-educated. And of all backgrounds, there were Christians and Jews alike in that group. And they founded the first League of Women Voters there in New York City. And but the leagues we founded out here in the small towns were not like that. In the big cities, yes, there are advantages to being in a big city. Milwaukee County League of Women Voters is a huge, huge league. Now, Ripon League is interesting. Now that we have men in the league, we have a larger percentage of men than any other league in Wisconsin, I believe. And they're not all husbands of league members. We've always had other male members, and we still do, and currently are getting new ones again. And so people say, why don't you just call it the League of Voters then, if you're going to have men too? There's a good reason. If we do that, our name is copyrighted, League of Women Voters. So everything that we have done over the years would be lost, and anybody could pick up that name and use it and be exactly opposite of what the League has always stood for. So we don't change our name, even though we have male members now. Okay, yeah. I hope that explains.
That was great. That was really good.
You got the idea.
Yep, you're doing good.
Okay.
I was wondering if you would want to just talk about the League studies issues. We come to consensus, and then we take action.
Okay. Well, first of all, if we're going to study something, we look at the issue. And I remember when we studied the organization of city government, boy, did we work on that. Every one of the city committees, somebody went and sat at several of their meetings, then reported back to the League saying what their purpose was, how well we thought they were following their purpose, and we did that for every single committee and board in the city of Ripon. And yeah, that was a workout.
Yes.
So when we finished that, we understood how our city government worked better than we ever had before. And we were looking on the question of having a mayor and city council as the simplest one, or if we were going to hire someone beside a mayor to help with administration of the city. And so we were talking about getting a city administrator. And so we went at it, and we got that job authorized, and we hired our city administrator, and they were trained really to work without a mayor. So it was very hard for those administrators to work with a mayor the way we wanted them to. But they did. They came around and they did it, and it worked out very well for us here because we had the professionally trained administrator, and the mayor usually didn't have any special training for something like that. We've had good mayors, though, over the years. I talk politics often with Dave Gray. He was one of our city mayors, and he was very good.
Do we want to talk a little bit about the fact that our voter service programs that we have really focus often on encouraging people to register to vote. Also, we have candidate forums.
Yes. Oh, the candidate forums are important, especially for our local candidates, school board, city council, mayor, county board. Those are the local important elections. And so if there are 2 or more candidates for an office, we will invite them in and ask them questions, and they'll all have to answer similar questions. Now, if you're going to interview a candidate, the first thing you want to find out is where he was born, how long he has lived in Ripon
Or she.
What?
He or she.
He or she, yes. Yeah. And you ask these questions, and then you ask them why they want to serve on the school board. Now, some of them might say, well, I have a son or a daughter that's in the Ripon school, so I want to make sure that there are good schools here. And some may say, or I have a niece or nephew, and somebody else may say, well, I just think that it's important that this town has the very best schools it can have. I want to be proud of my city. And then somebody else might say, well, I don't want to pay any more taxes for that school district that I have to. And so I'd like to be on the board to make sure I don't have to pay too many taxes. So you can see where people are coming from when you simply ask them a question like that. And then you ask the same question or a similar question of each candidate, and then you get an idea of why they're running and whether you, the voter, want someone like that on your school board or not. And so that's the kind of a candidate interview we do.
And we never endorse.
What?
We never endorse any.
We never endorse, we never say the league is for this candidate. No, we just get the questions answered, and sometimes it's recorded like this and played over again on the local radio station, and sometimes it's recorded and the information printed in the Ripon paper. So we have been fortunate over the years in that the radio station and the newspaper have both been very cooperative, and that's been extremely important to us.
At this time, we often reach out into the city of Green Lake also, or we're approached, and then we will respond. For example, there are 3 candidates for mayor in Green Greenlight.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we want to clarify the fact that while we never endorse a candidate, we might support a new law that fits into something we studied and came to consensus on. We might support an issue because we've studied it.
But we never support an individual or a political party.
I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how the League of Women Voters has evolved since the early 1960s, and now we're in the next century, and what would you say is an important
Well,
change?
I would say I'm very proud of this league because it has faltered at times, but then revived again. And some of it from our longtime members like Cindy and myself, and some of it's from new people that have come in and given us a push that we needed. But right now we have, I think, which is 52 members, did you say?
I think it's 52 right now.
And that's good size for a town this size. So we're kind of proud of that. We had when we got organized, we were about 40 members. Mm-hmm. And now we're up to 52. We've been higher than 52 in between, up into the 60s, the lower 60s. But
And now we reach out into Washera County and Greenlight County. So that's why the name changed, League of Women Voters of the Ripon area.
yes, now we expanded. We have members in Green Lake County and even a couple in Washera County. So, yeah.
Cindy, can I jump in here?
Yes.
I have a question for you, Liz.
Yes.
Cindy kind of touched on this, but what do you think, as one of the original members, the impact or the importance of the League of Women Voters in the Ripon area has been? When you look back over all
Well,
these years,
I think probably our candidate interviews, and then I used to have the privilege of doing a regular radio interview with not just candidates, but people that were actually in office. And I was privileged to interview U.S. senators, congressmen, right and left, and plus all kinds of local officers. And so that was a real experience for me. And I didn't know if anyone was listening to my interviews or not. And I was at a holiday dinner across the driveway at Paul Jeffrey's home one year, and there was a retired professor from the college there, and he laughed. He said, "Oh yes, we all listen to you over at the college." And he said, because it was the only way we knew to get these people to tell the truth. When this nice lady came up and asked them what they thought about this or that, they'd tell me. They were honest, and I was honest with them in their questions. I was telling them that these answers wouldn't be used against them. Or, they were just to tell whatever they thought. And so, yeah, I enjoyed doing those interviews so much. And someone said, could we do that again? I said, oh yes. I think it would take me about 5 minutes to teach anyone to do that kind of interview. Because the first thing you want to do if you have a candidate or anybody else is establish who they are, so what their influence in the state or nation or county board or whatever their influence is, and then you want to ask them questions about what they really think, and that's it. And anybody with a medium amount of intelligence can do an interview like that. And I'd love to see someone in the league pick it up again and do it, because I think maybe we'd get a new listening audience and people that would pay attention to the league because they heard us on the radio.
It was just one more thing I wanted to stress is that when we would study an issue and come to consensus and advocate, and I'm thinking right now about Ripon, we did things like advocate for the city administrator position, but we also advocated for a taxi system in Ripon.
Oh yes, that's right.
So
And we've done so many things over the years that you forget.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's been an interesting ride.
I'm going to ask you one more question. And
Sure.
This is maybe more for my curiosity. But you said you were born in 1927.
Yes.
Okay. And I did the math in my head, and I think I'm close. I bet you haven't missed too many voting opportunities in 70 or 75 years since you've been eligible.
Well, so
To talk about the importance of voting and what that means to cast a vote.
every single person should vote in every single election, but they should know what they're voting for and why they're voting. So many people vote against their own interests because they don't understand what the various candidates are standing for, and they vote against their own interests. And that's so sad, but all we can do is to keep on trying to inform people. And that's one of the chief jobs of the League of Women Voters.
Perfect answer. That was a great answer.
All right, thank you.
He gave you 2 thumbs up.
Yes.
Great question.
Yes.
So, thank you so much for coming and doing this interview, and I hope that it will be used so that we'll have a great many people from the town out to our meeting on the 3rd Thursday of the month. Okay.
Maybe we
Yeah, I always have to do the promotion and
Got that in.
yeah, right.
Good.
You could mention there are League of Women Voters pieces of information out at Ripon Library.
Right.
There are pieces of information about our league, the calendar card that Leilani puts together, that's out at Green Lake Library and Ripon Library. I need to get it better distributed. But we are very interested in answering questions if people are considering.
Mm-hmm.